The Re-Animator. Re-Animator is a cult classic horror film from 1985, and it's about a guy that can bring back the dead. A scientist, a med student actually, named Herbert West. And Herbert West has created this formula that will actually reanimate dead living tissue, formerly living tissue. And there's more to it than that. This was based on the H.P. Lovecraft story Herbert West, Re-Animator, which is really only about 30 to 50 pages long, I believe, written way back in like the 20s or 30s or something like that. Yeah, you have Herbert West. He's this med student. He comes to Miskatonic University, where he is enrolled in the medical program. He's a very strange and very arrogant individual, and he does believe that he does have the power to bring the dead back to life. And throughout the course of this movie, he definitely proves that. And he studies under one Dr. Hill. Dr. Hill doesn't believe that reanimating corpses is possible at all. He believes that the brain dies after 6 to 12 minutes. Herbert West, he's in class and he's like snapping pencils to show his disdain while the professor is talking, while Dr. Hill is giving his lecture, while peeling the skin off of a dead corpse scalp. After all of this, Herbert West becomes roommates with Dan, a fellow med student. Dan is coincidentally dating the dean's daughter. Dan's girlfriend, Megan, of course, doesn't really like Herbert West very much and is very suspicious of him, but she's in love with Dan. Now, things quickly go south. Dan's cat goes missing, and Megan accidentally stumbles upon the cat's corpse in Herbert West's mini fridge that he has in his room. Now, that's a little weird. West explains that the cat died and I didn't have time to write a note or let you know what was going on, so I decided to just keep the body preserved. You know, I didn't want it stinking up the place, so I just thought I'd explain it later. Well, Dan doesn't seem too freaked out by this. Believes West and allows him to actually set up a laboratory in the basement of the house that they're sharing. And a few nights later, discovers that West is in the basement using his syringe full of magical green glowy juice to try and reanimate Rufus the cat. And it's still ambiguous at this point whether West killed the cat in order to use him for the experiment. But yeah, Dan stumbles across West being attacked by the reanimated cat. And so that's a crazy scene. I mean, you get this puppet reanimated zombie cat that's attacking the guy, and it comes off like those comedy movies where, you know, they throw a stuffed dog at somebody and hold it on their neck and pretend that it's attacking them, and in this case it's a cat, and all the horrible noises, and it's really funny actually. But if they did use a real cat, oh my god, the things they do to this poor cat. Anyway, so they have to kill the cat again. And so in order to convince Dan that his serum actually works, West decides to inject the cat. He's obviously dead now. Let's see what happens, and I'll prove it to you. And lo and behold, the cat comes back to life, and it's this mangled up puppet cat that it makes the most horrible noises, but it's so weird and it's so off-putting, and I don't know, it's a memorable scene. Anyway, Dan's convinced. He's going to help him sneak into the morgue and find a cadaver and test it on a dead body. So they break into the lab and they inject one of the corpses with the reanimation juice, and the corpse turns violent and starts attacking the two of them. This is interrupted by the dean, who comes in and basically gets attacked by the zombie human, and he gets killed. And before the police arrive, which they're definitely on their way now, they manage to put down the rogue corpse and reanimate the Dean. And Dr. Hill has, of course, insidious plans as well. He's not 100% convinced, but he's starting to think that maybe West is onto something. Maybe you can reanimate corpses. So he takes the Dean under his wing and promises to take care of him, all kind of in an attempt to seduce, or I guess gain access to Megan, the Dean's daughter, who he's completely in love with in a stalkery kind of way. So Dan and Herbert, they manage to not get arrested, but Dr. Hill comes and pays them a visit at their house, tries to commandeer his serum and all of his work and his research. And so West has to defend himself and kill Dr. Hill. And he decapitates him with a shovel. And for whatever reason, he decides to reanimate, separately no less, the head and the headless body of Dr. Hill. Now the head and the headless body, for whatever reason, still share a connection. It just gets crazy from there. I don't want to tell you the whole movie, but from this point on, Dr. Hill is the villain of the movie and wants to control an army of zombies. And it looks like he's able to do it. Now, I won't spoil the end for you, but let's just say that Dan comes out of all this okay. I think he's the only one. I mean, mentally, he's gone through a lot. Now, it's not exactly a complicated or convoluted story. Basically, just he has magic juice and he can reanimate corpses. They're not going to explain too much of it, which is a sign of a really good horror movie. In the lead role, or as Herbert West, the Re-Animator, is Jeffrey Combs. Now, I recognize this guy mainly from this, but he's been in a lot of like low-budget, mostly direct-to-video horror or fantasy movies, mostly back in the 80s, maybe through the 90s. He was in The Frighteners. He was in From Beyond, which is another one based on a Lovecraft story. He even played a superhero, sort of a rip-off Doctor Strange in the movie Dr. Mordred. Now, I haven't seen all of these movies, but after seeing this again, I really want to, because I really enjoyed his performance in here. He's crazy, he's arrogant, but he's super intelligent, and he speaks with an air of authority. He's like a more intelligent, less successful, I guess, Bruce Campbell. The role of Dan is played by a guy named Bruce Abbott. I don't really know too much of his work, and to be quite honest, I didn't really care for him that much in this movie, but he served the purpose, and he's just a narrative tool, I suppose. Tool. Then, of course, as Megan, the daughter of the Dean, she's played by Barbara Crampton. Now, Barbara Crampton used to be a soap opera star, and then to see her in a bunch of movies in the 80s, a bunch of horror movies, and then she gets naked, that's alright. She's actually a really good actress, and she's obviously got a pretty good sense of humor, judging by a lot of weird-ass movies that she's been in. Like, she's been in this, of course. She was also in From Beyond, another Lovecraft one. Then she was in, like, Chopping Mall, The Puppet Master. Yeah, she's in a lot of stuff, man. And I enjoyed her performance. She doesn't really do too much more than kind of scream and react to stuff, but she seems like a real person in this movie, whereas like the villain, Dr. Hill, played by a guy named David Gale, by the way. Yeah, that guy. He's a little over the top, a little ridiculous. Dan is kind of stupid. Herbert West is extreme. But Barbara Crampton is kind of like the anchor, like the actual one normal person in this entire movie. Now, when it comes to like gore and stuff, yeah, it's pretty extreme in this movie, but to be quite honest with you, there's stuff that blows this out of the water. But when I first saw it, I thought this was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's not just because of the gore, but just kind of the situations that they get into and reanimating corpses and stuff. It's highly entertaining, and I can see why this is a cult classic movie. I mean, there's so many things to like about this. The puppet zombie cat was hilarious. The headless Dr. Hill, there's some pretty funny gags with that, actually. some of the ridiculous zombies that are in there. Yeah, there's a lot of weird shit in this movie, and there's a lot of fun stuff in this movie. This is a very fun movie to watch. I mean, it's not one of those like stalker slasher kind of movies, so it's like nothing that's gonna really like scare you, but it's more just gonna make you go, ew, like a lot. I loved this movie back in the day, and I can't believe it's been so long since I've seen it. But going back and watching it now, like, there's a few plot holes in there. They're not necessarily plot holes, but things that don't really add up or make very much sense. Some of the effects, it's pretty obvious how it was done, but still the spectacle and the weirdness of the special effects in here far outweighs any like tiny little flaws that I might nitpick and find in this almost 40-year-old movie. But yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and give Re-Animator an A-. If you're a horror movie fan, you've probably heard of this movie and you've probably seen it, or you should. Anyway, have a good one, everybody.